Hello, and thank you for joining me. If you are ever in doubt, those opening scenes happened on the floor of the Nigeria House of Representatives earlier today. Those are lawmakers who were recalled to a special session to discuss proposed amendments to the 2022 Electoral Act. Both the House and the Senate were recalled for the same reasons today. But the main focus for me in this episode is why we're seeing what we're seeing with regards proposed amendments to the 2022 Electoral Act, and particularly the vexed issue of electronic transmission of results in real time. Let me say that Nigeria as a country is playing a dangerous game. Why do I say so? The 2027 electoral calendar has already been declared. Campaign season is approaching. Political realignments are also happening. But rather than strengthening the rules of the game, lawmakers are reopening debates about believes that this is being done for the right reasons. Look, let's be honest. If 2023 exposed cracks in Nigeria's electoral system, the solution should be tighter transparency, not wider discretion. So I ask, why is electronic transmission still controversial for us as a country? Whichever way that you look at the issue, we cannot describe Nigeria as being totally backwards when it comes to the embrace of technology. I'll come back to this later. Let's look at the numbers first. The 2023 general elections, Nigeria had over 93 million voters for that election. Yet, only about 27% voters turned out to vote in that election, going by official figures. So the 2023 election stands as one of the lowest in Nigeria's democratic history. The bimodal voter accreditation system worked relatively well at polling units all across the country, and that BIVA system, as we call it for short, depends on the use of technology. But the delay and inconsistency in uploading results to the public viewing portal that the INEC promised triggered nationwide controversy, particularly as it concerns the presidential election. The gap between accreditation success and result transmission failure created a trust deficit, a trust crisis for Nigeria. And we all know that trust, once broken, is expensive to rebuild. Now, instead of strengthening mandatory electronic transmission, we are debating flexibility. And the question is, flexibility, for who? The 2022 Electoral Act, which is a subsisting law, gave legal backing to technology, including electronic accreditation and transmission. But it did not make electronic transmission mandatory in every scenario. That ambiguity, unfortunately, became the centerpiece of post-election litigation. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth. If results are electronically uploaded directly from the polling units in real time, manipulation space shrinks dramatically. I hope we can all agree on this point. But if transmission is delayed or it's made discretionary, as the lawmakers are proposing, collation centers will likely become negotiation centers. So electronic transmission is not about convenience. It is about closing the window for interference. Now, I guess the question will be, who is resisting mandatory electronic result transmission and in real time? Let's be clear, it's not the voters, it's not Nigerians, it's not civil society, neither is it election observers. The resistance typically comes from political actors who understand that opacity is leverage. Technology reduces elite bargaining power after ballots are cast. And I think that is the real fight. Demanding clarity, no vague clauses, no open-ended discretion, no last-minute rule changes, because ambiguity is fertile ground for conflict. And Nigeria, at the state we find ourselves in right now, we can do with one less conflict. So civil society organizations, coalitions, and so on have been very strident in their call that electronic transmission of results from polling units should be made mandatory. And not just that, it should be made mandatory, it should also be made mandatory to be done in real time on the public results viewing portal, backed by law and not by policy promises. I think that is something that we can all agree on as a progressive nation and as a country that wants to be taken seriously as the leading democracy, the biggest democracy on the continent of Africa, and indeed the biggest black democracy in the entire world. It's indicated to the lawmakers during the series of public hearings that it conducted over this proposed amendment across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. Now, I would also add that there is another risk that the entire electoral process could be exposed to. That if reforms are passed too late, INEC may struggle with procurement timelines, how INEC will deploy technology, training of its staff and ad hoc staff, as well as how to properly educate voters in terms of voter education. Nigeria conducts elections across 176,000 polling units, 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. All of this involves complex logistics and, as we know, in many insecure areas, from the northeast, northwest, now even to the north central, and even parts of the south have become rather insecure. So what we are doing right now is that we are changing rules of the day, literally just a year before the election. Now, if you keep changing the rules to the election just months before a major nationwide operation, I think we're laying the foundation for a crisis, because we know that election requires nationwide. It's the biggest peacetime operation any country can mobilize at any point in time. Late reforms equals weak implementation. Weak implementation will give us what? It equals controversies for us as a country. So here is my recommendation. If Nigeria is serious about credible election come 2027, first and foremost, discretion must be removed. And this can be done by the law, that the law states mandatory electronic transmission of results, no loopholes, no subject to availability. So if accreditation is electronic, result must be electronic as well. The other point that I would, recommendation that I would suggest is that the INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission, should conduct a nationwide public simulation test. Before the 2027 election, INEC should conduct live stress tests of result transmission systems and make it open to observers and the media. It's quite heartwarming that the chairman of the Election Commission, Professor Joash Amopiton, last week when he was announcing the dates for the election, did say that the commission is happy to undertake a mock presidential election just to test out this system. And I think that is an opportunity that we should take on board fully. INEC should demonstrate transparency. It's not that transparency, just declaring transparency is not enough. It should be demonstrated. So in closing, I say that Nigeria cannot afford another election clouded by ambiguity. Elections are not just about who wins. They are about whether citizens believe the process was fair. The debate over the Electoral Act is not legal housekeeping. It is a battle over power. Who holds it, who checks it, and who benefits from opacity? If electronic transmission threatens anyone, then maybe that tells us why exactly it must be protected. 2027 is closer than we think, and the clock is ticking for Nigeria. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the show. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And until I see you in the next episode, I say, God bless Nigeria.